Come in, they come in.
Oh, use your podium.
Yeah.
Well, welcome everybody. My name is Danielle Rougeau. I'm the president of the Orwell Historical Museum. Thank you very much for coming, and thank you to Kate for making the space available for us. This is one in a series of lectures that we're doing monthly, sponsored by the museum. So tonight's speaker is John Tester. He's lived in Orwell for the last 21 years with his wife Kathy, and he currently works as the operations manager for a commercial HVAC company, JDW Mechanical. He devotes much of his time to outside interests, including serving as the president of the American Legion Auxiliary State of Vermont and the executive director for the Dodge House, a transitional housing program for homeless veterans in Vermont. Mr. Tester is particularly involved in Freemasonry. Not only does he serve as the junior warden at Independence Lodge number 10, the Grand Pursuivant. I look Pursuivant. That's what I saw online. That's what they said. But okay, good. I like that one. That's good. Whatever you are, at the Grand Lodge of Vermont, and the Grand Marshal for the Grand Chapter of the Eastern Star of Vermont. He has also done extensive research and published articles on famous Masons, including U.S. presidents. Please welcome John Tester.
Thank you. Well, good evening. I want to repeat a little bit about what the introduction there. I had been a Master Mason for 21 years, and for 20 of those 21 years, I had been a member of Independence Lodge number 10 here in Orwell. I've held many positions within the Masonic family, including having held 11 of the 12 officer positions in the lodge next door, as well as the positions of District Deputy Grand Master, Grand Senior Deacon, and Grand Marshal for the Grand Lodge of Vermont. I'm currently the Grand Pursuivant, which is just a fancy name for someone who's in charge of all of the aprons and the jewels for the Grand Lodge for the state of Vermont. I'm also a member of Eastern Star, Marble Chapter 80 in Brandon, and a pendant body of the Masonic family where I have held many of the officer positions. And as she stated, I'm currently the Grand Marshal for the Grand Chapter of Vermont. My daughter, who was supposed to be here tonight but wasn't able to make it, was the leader of Rainbow Girls, a youth organization of the Masonic family. I served as her Rainbow Dad for 2 years and has been treasurer for the last 8 years. I'm a member of Shriners. It's that group of Masons that wear these really cool looking hats. And I've been a member of Shriners for about 18 years, and I was Grand Marshal for the Shriners for 1 year. All right, that's enough of that. I've been a member of the Vermont Masonic Lodge of Research for 12 years, which is exactly what it sounds like. Brothers of this dependent body conduct all kinds of research and write papers and do presentations. And besides the history of Independence Lodge, I have researched and written about many Masonic presidents and other famous Masons. And lastly, I was chairman of the Grand Lodge of Vermont Library Committee for 3 years and was the editor of the Green Mountain Freemason, a Vermont Masonic magazine that we publish twice a year for 6 years. So tonight, I'm going to talk about the history of Independence Lodge number 10. Independence Lodge has been active here in Orwell for the last 209 years. Come on in. But first, before we get into Independence Lodge, I wanted to start with a very basic introduction of where Masonry came from and how it made its way into Vermont. The most widely accepted origins of Freemasonry is that they started out as stonemasons in 926 AD. These men became fantastic architects and builders of stone castles, forts, cathedrals, and temples, the most famous of which was King Solomon's Temple. These masons, called operative masons, became so gifted in their craftsmanship that they formed guilds or clubs. These guys had a lot of secrets in how they perfected their craft, and they wanted to keep their secrets secret. Because the more people who knew how to be a professional stonemason, the less in demand their services would be. So, in order to be a member of this guild of stonemasons, you needed to know a password or know a secret handshake. It was an exclusive club for only the very best operative stonemasons. In the late 1500s, the Masons Guild became so popular that the King of Scotland, King James VI, was allowed to join. What followed was the Masons Guild allowing all sorts of nobles, lawyers, and doctors, as well as other powerful men, to join the fraternity. Thus, the Stonemasons Guild now known just as Freemasons, changed from operative stonemasons to what we call today speculative Masons. We just belonged to a fraternity that just started out as stonemasons. For the next 250 years, the Masons became extremely popular and extremely powerful. What they espoused was camaraderie, being a good citizen, and faith in God. Masonic lodges were basically social clubs for men. Because Masonry was so popular in Europe, as Europeans started to migrate to the land known as America, they brought Freemasonry with them. The very first Masonic lodge opened in America in Boston in July 1733, 43 years before we became the United States of America. And over the next 50 years, Masonic lodges sprang up all over the 13 colonies at a frenetic pace. By some estimates, Masonic lodges were being formed at the rate of one a week. Freemasonry was extremely common among our founding fathers, with the vast majority being Masons. George Washington became such a powerful Mason that when he was inaugurated president of the United States, he used a Bible from a Masonic lodge in Philadelphia. Washington also dedicated the cornerstone of the new Capitol building in what was to become Washington, D.C., while wearing his Masonic apron and using a Masonic trowel. And today, almost every Masonic lodge in the country has a picture of President George Washington standing at the altar wearing his Masonic apron. Freemasonry finally arrived in Vermont when Vermont Lodge was chartered in 1781, 10 years before Vermont even became a state. Over the next 16 years, 4 more lodges were chartered in Vermont: Manchester in 1785, Dorchester Lodge in Vergennes in 1788, Temple Lodge in Bennington in 1793, and Union Lodge in Middlebury in 1797. These 5 lodges are considered to be the birth of Freemasonry in Vermont. So, the town of Orwell wanted its own Masonic lodge, as most of the towns that were getting lodges chartered. Orwell tried twice, 1812 and 1813, but both times it was denied. I'm not totally aware of why it was denied, but my guess is the Grand Lodge of Vermont was chartering lodges at such a rapid pace that they were just trying to put the brakes on a little bit, slow things down. In November of 1814, they took a different tack. 17 men from Orwell traveled to Middlebury and met with the Grand Master of the state of Vermont, John Chipman, in person. And they asked him if they could have a lodge in the town of Orwell. The Grand Master penned a reply. And this is the original letter from Grand Master Chipman, dated 1814. To all free and accepted Masons to whom these presents shall come, greetings. Whereas application hath been made to me by Mr. Daniel Root, Waite Branch, Asher Nichols, Benjamin Fuller, Samuel Page, James Conkey, William Fuller, Samuel B. Walker, Thomas Goodnick, Samuel Humphrey, Joseph Shields, Samuel Griswold, Thomas White, Willis Abel, you hear that name a lot, Mr. Parker, Reuben Webb, and Ephraim Scoville, free and accepted Master Masons of Orwell, and the vicinity thereof in the county of Rutland, state of Vermont, to grant them a dispensation to convene a lodge at Orwell until the next session of the Grand Lodge. I do therefore, by virtue of the power and authority in me vested by the Grand Lodge of the state of Vermont, duly grant unto these beloved brethren full power and authority to convene and meet as Masons within the town of Orwell. By the name of Independence Lodge, number, and there was no number assigned, it was blank, to receive and enter apprentices, pass fellowcrafts, and raise to the sublime degree of Master Masons those whom they shall judge worthy until the next session of the Grand Lodge in October next and no longer. And I do, by these presents, constitute and appoint our beloved brethren, Daniel Root, Master, Waite Branch, Senior Warden, and Asher Nichols, Junior Warden, giving them the usual prerogatives and privileges of Masons, and witness my hand and private seal at Middlebury, the 7th day of November, AL 5814, which is 1814. And so I will leave this here for you guys to peruse later. So the lodge was granted a temporary charter. And at the Grand Lodge of Communication on the 9th of October, 1815, held in the town of Windsor, they were approved to receive a permanent charter. When Orwell received its charter, the USA was just 38 years old. James Madison, the country's 4th president, was still in office. And Presidents John Adams and Thomas Jefferson were both still alive. When Orwell received his charter from the Grand Lodge of Vermont in 1815, there were already 39 Masonic lodges in Vermont. The charter was signed by the Grand Master and presented to the members on October 15, 1815. The lodge was designated Independence Lodge number 40. The original charter hangs in our lodge room, and we are not permitted to hold a meeting unless that charter is present. Now, I want to point out an error. In this wonderful book, A History of the Town of Orwell, Vermont, first published in 1988. It has a very nice article on page 118 about our Masonic Lodge, which, as far as my research shows, is completely accurate, except that it states when the lodge received its charter in 1815, it was numbered number 10. That is not correct. The original charter number was 40. But was later changed to number 10 in 1849, which we're going to talk a lot about in a little bit. The very first top 3 officers, as stated in the letter, were Daniel Root, Worshipful Master, Waite Brandt, Senior Warden, and Asher Nichols, Junior Warden. The lodge's first meeting took place on October 30th, 1815. It is not clear where the lodge first met, but it may possibly have been the Worshipful Master's home, as was the custom in the day. During the lodge's first meeting, they elected new officers. Worshipful Master was Waite Branch, Senior Warden Asher Nichols, Junior Warden was Joel Barber, the Treasurer was Willis Abel, and the Secretary Ephraim Scoville. From 1815 until 1831, Independence Lodge met monthly, usually in the early evening, at various locations in and around the town of Orwell, mostly at one of the houses at Abel's Corner, which is the corner of Old Sawmill Road and 73, owned by Willis Abel. It also met at the Griswold homestead across from Abel's Corners. That site has since been torn down. It is believed they started meeting at Boynton Inn about 1831. I have some doubts about that, but I can't prove it. We will discuss that meeting place a little later. Their meeting day, as was noted in their charter, was the first Tuesday after the full moon each month, which for most of the last 209 years has been the second Tuesday of the month. Membership in Independence Lodge grew steadily during its first few years, reaching well over 50 members by 1830. At the time, Independence Lodge could receive members from Orwell, Benson, Shoreham, Sudbury, West Haven, and Whiting. In 1800, the Grand Lodge chartered a new lodge in West Haven called Cement Lodge number 19. At the time, there was no lodge in Fairhaven or Pulteney, so Cement Lodge drew members from both of those towns. In 1826, when the anti-Masonic period hit, Cement Lodge surrendered their charter and never reopened. When the lodges began meeting again, the only lodge available for membership from Fairhaven all the way north to Shoreham was Independence Lodge number 10 in Orwell. In 1862, the Grand Lodge of Vermont chartered a lodge in Shoreham called Simmons Lodge number 59, and it remained open until 1987, when it merged with Morning Sun Lodge number 5 in Bridport. Fairhaven was finally granted a lodge, Eureka Lodge number 75, in 1867, and it is still in operation today. In 1869, Benson was granted a charter for a lodge in their town called Acacia Lodge number 91. They remained open until June 10th, 1971, when they merged with Independence Lodge number 10. When they merged, Independence Lodge took possession of their charter, as well as all of their old minute books and other items, including a full set of dishes, plates, bowls, cups, etc., all emblazoned with the Masonic emblem. Independence still has all of these items in storage, my shop. The original charter for Acacia Lodge, number 91, still hangs in our lodge room. There's no record about what happened to all of their furniture and the wall hangings from their lodge room, but sometimes these items were sold or donated to other lodges around the state, or the Grand Lodge would take possession of them and then give them out to lodges who suffered a fire or some other loss. So for the first 17 years of our lodge's existence, we drew members from 5 surrounding towns. While Acacia and Simmons Lodges were open, we only drew members from Orwell and Whiting. When Acacia closed in 1971, we drew members from Benson and West Haven. When Simmons closed in 1987, members from Shoreham went to Morning Sun in Bridport. And although the Grand Lodge of Vermont dropped its residency requirements some 25 or more years ago, meaning lodges can accept members from any town within the state, almost all of our members still hail from Orwell, Benson, and Whiting. Then, in 1826, in Batavia, New York, Masonry took a very dark turn. A man named William Morgan, a disliked Mason because of his drinking, was going to write a book and spill all of the Masonic secrets. Morgan was arrested for being indigent, but was subsequently released. After being released, he was taken away, supposedly to be released in Canada. But at some point, he was killed and his body dumped in the Niagara River. Morgan was never seen again. All of this was perpetrated by Masons. Of the 28 New York Masons arrested, only 4 were found guilty, mostly due to a lot of Masonic interference. This event caused such a huge backlash, sparking more than 100 newspapers to write about the dastardly deeds of the New York Masons. The anti-Masonic period had begun, and it spread through the country like wildfire. All Freemasons were barred from holding any public office. Many were kicked out of their churches. If you professed your loyalty to the Masonic order during this period, you were subject to being taken down a back alley and severely beaten. In the presidential elections of 1832, William Wirt was nominated as the anti-Masonic Party presidential nominee. He only carried about 8% of the vote in America, but he did win one primary. Guess where? State of Vermont. In 1848, it was over. Freemasonry started to make a comeback. Masons reinvented themselves, making charity their number one cause. They became well known for the homes for the elderly, orphanages, and children's hospitals. At a meeting in 1832, the Brothers of Independence Lodge held a vote on whether to surrender their charter. 8 staunch supporters of the craft voted to keep the charter, and they were in the majority. So the lodge never surrendered their charter. But because of the hysteria of the day, they hid it in the hayloft of a barn owned by Willis Abel, over at Willis Abel's Corners, their old meeting place. From 1832 until 1847, during the anti-Masonic period, Independence Lodge did not hold any regular communications, at least publicly. They did meet clandestinely at various times inside the Ketchum residence on the Sudbury-Orwell line, usually only a couple of times per year. In 1847, Independence Lodge finally resumed their regular communications, still meeting at the Boynton Inn. In 1826, there were 63 lodges in Vermont. When the Vermont emerged from the anti-Masonic period in 1847, there were only 18 lodges left. Those 18 are the ones who had not surrendered their charters, Independence Lodge being one of them. At the Grand Lodge Communication of 1849, held in Montpelier, Grand Master Tucker declared that all of the lodges that did not surrender their charters will be renumbered in order of their original charter dates. Independence Lodge was renumbered number 10, the number we hold today. In 1859, controversy struck Independence Lodge when it was discovered that its sitting master, George D. Dowd, who had affiliated or joined Independence Lodge some years prior, was discovered to have been expelled from Masonry when he belonged to a lodge in Whitehall, New York. At the Grand Lodge session of 1860, Grand Master Philip Tucker stated the following during his Grand Master's address. I have had to meet the extraordinary spectacle of finding an expelled Mason filling the chair of one of our subordinate lodges as its regular chosen master. At first, I was wholly incredulous that such a circumstance could be possible, and yet investigation proved it to be true. He went on to cite any number of infractions this Mason had perpetrated. And a little farther in his address, he went on to state, I ordered the senior warden to take possession of the charter of the lodge and the key to the lodge room, to direct the lodge door to be shut against the master, and to take the east himself and go on with the business of the lodge as if the master was dead. Grand Master Tucker further stated, so far as I'm concerned, no case of precisely this character has before occurred in our order, certainly none in this Masonic jurisdiction. The Grand Master immediately sent a letter to Independence Lodge removing Mr. Dowd from the master's chair and turning the gavel over to the senior warden. There is no further record as to what precisely happened to George Dowd, but it is assumed that he left Freemasonry, and probably the town of Orwell. As Freemasonry became very popular, with more and more members attending, people's homes were not big enough to meet. So they started using back rooms of taverns or meeting halls. In 1831, Independence Lodge started meeting in the upstairs room of the Boynton Inn, on the back side of the old Boynton Inn sign, which is right upstairs in this room, in this building. On the front's the Boynton Inn, on the back side is Independence Lodge number 10. Sometime between 1855 and 1857, Independence Lodge came into possession of a very large Bible they use on its altar. That Bible has been on that altar of Independence Lodge for 167 plus years and is still used today. In 1861, controversy once again found our beloved lodge. The district deputy reported to the Grand Master that the room where the lodge was meeting in the Boynton Inn was unsafe, where the lodge was susceptible to eavesdroppers. This was kind of surprising, as the lodge had been meeting there for almost 21 years. They did not meet during the anti-Masonic period. So began the search for a suitable meeting place, and that letter from the district deputy is one of the letters displayed on the far table over there. In 1865, Independence Lodge began the process of buying a building suitable for a lodge. They looked to prominent Orwell citizen Abel Wright. Mr. Wright had a white clapboard building that he had recently moved up to Main Street in Orwell between his residence and the Orwell Library. Abel Wright was willing to sell the top floor, and only the top floor, to the Orwell Masons. So they started raising money to purchase the building for $250. And in the fall of 1866, Independence Lodge purchased the top floor of Abel Wright's woodshop on Main Street. The deed of the sale is that framed document at the end of that first table. After some remodeling, they held their first meeting in the new lodge building on January 23rd, 1867. For the last 157 years, Independence Lodge has been meeting in the same lodge room they are using today. Over the years, there have been many improvements to our lodge room, adding electricity, which replaced the old oil lamps, and there is an original oil lamp still hanging on the wall in our lodge room. And the heating system, which replaced the wood stove located on the north wall of the lodge room. The chimney from that wood stove remained long after the stove was gone, but was finally taken down when the building was moved in 2016. A year after it moved into the new lodge room, in 1868, the lodge voted to purchase a brand new desk for the secretary. That desk has been in use for 156 years and is still used every meeting today. And it held a surprise, which we'll talk about in a bit. During the Civil War, several residents of Orwell who were out fighting sent letters to the lodge in Orwell asking to become members when they returned. And I have one such letter, and I'm not sure this gentleman was out fighting. I couldn't find his name anywhere, but this is indicative of what type of letters the lodge was receiving. To the Master, Wardens, and Brethren of Independence Lodge Number 10, your petitioner respectfully shareth his having long entertained a favorable opinion of your ancient and honorable institution, is desirous of becoming a member thereof, if found worthy. His residence is Orwell, his occupation is a farmer, his age is 24 years, and it was signed by Henry D. Bascom on April 11th, 1865. And he even included $2 for his dues for the year. D.C. Bascom and D. Abel are the two Masons who vouched for him. So there's a book over there that's full of petitions. And most of them are letters like this one, because there were no forms to fill out for petitioning. You just wrote a letter and you would ask a Mason what it was supposed to say, and almost all of them have the exact same wording. And they signed it, and they brought it to lodge meeting, and they voted you in, usually. On October 17th, 1915, Independence Lodge celebrated its 100th anniversary with a live orchestra, a huge feast at the town hall where tickets were required for admission. Numerous speeches were made, including a 9-page, legal-sized, typewritten speech by a worshipful master, J.C. Thomas. And many awards were handed out. It was a grand, grand event. During World War I, 2 members of Independence Lodge went off to fight the Great War. King Burnell and William Needham, both brothers, our brothers, returned home safely from the war and remained members of Independence Lodge for many years. During World War II, 2 of our brothers from Independence Lodge fought, Sidney Thomas and George B. Wright. Brother Sidney Thomas did come back safely, and Sidney was the son of our most worshipful J.C. Thomas, who we'll discuss in a moment. Brother George B. Wright has an asterisk next to his name on the memorial at the town green, which indicates he died during the war. In Brother Wright's case, he was home in Orwell when he died of a heart attack, but he was, at the time, a member of the United States Navy working as an archivist at the Naval College. The Korean War from 1850 to 1853 saw no members of Independence Lodge serve. And the Vietnam War, which saw U.S. involvement from 1963 to 1971, surprisingly, not a single brother from Independence Lodge served in the armed forces during the Vietnam War. One of the proudest moments for Independence Lodge occurred in the summer of 1934, when one of its members, Julius Charles Thomas, was elected and installed as the 44th Grand Master for the Grand Lodge of the state of Vermont. J.C., as he was known, served as Grand Master until 1936. J.C. was born in Orwell in 1886 and lived his entire life in Orwell, save for the periods that he attended schools outside the state. He was raised a Master Mason in Independence Lodge Number 10 on March 17, 1908, and served as Master 1915 during our 100th anniversary. While he was Grand Master, Most Worshipful Thomas guided Vermont Freemasonry through 2 years of the Great Depression. J.C. was the town moderator for Orwell from 1931 to 1953 and was elected as a 33rd degree Mason on September 28, 1960. Julius Charles Thomas died on September 17, 1961, and is buried in Mountain View Cemetery in Orwell with the Grand Master's headstone. He is the only member of Independence Lodge to ever become Grand Master of the state of Vermont. So beginning in 1984, Independence Lodge began offering a scholarship to graduating seniors whose father or grandfather was a Mason and a member of Independence Lodge. Since that date, we have awarded some $75,000 to 52 scholarship recipients. In the first 15 years of the new century, 2 major events took place. The first occurred in 2005. While cleaning out the inside of the secretary's desk, the lodge secretary discovered several bundles of paper that were tied with red ribbons. Curious about what they were, I began to untie the bundles and look at the papers. Over the next 6 weeks, More than 500 letters, petitions for membership, financial records, documents, and official correspondence were discovered, almost all of them dated before 1900. Many were in the early 1800s, the oldest of which was a letter from Morning Sun Lodge number 5, dated October 1810. Some of those items are on display here today. The binders that I have here with all of the documents in them account for about 20% of all of the documents we have for Independence Lodge. The second big event that occurred was in the spring of 2013. Brother Mark Young, a past master of Independence Lodge and CEO of the First National Bank of Orwell, made a proposal to Independence Lodge that would have the greatest impact on our lodge since it purchased the Wright Building in 1866. The bank had recently come into possession of the bottom floor of the lodge building, something that Independence Lodge had been unsuccessfully trying to obtain for years. Brother Mark and the bank would donate the bottom floor of the lodge building and donate a 1/4 acre of land if we would pick the lodge building up and move it off Main Street. So, it was an extremely generous offer, and that winter the members of the lodge voted to accept the offer and move the lodge. In September of 2014, the lodge building was picked up and moved to its new location right behind the library. Because of this generosity, kindness, and vision of Brother Mark Young and the First National Bank of Orwell, the lodge now had the opportunity to have a small kitchen and dining area, as well as a much-needed bathroom and storage on the bottom floor, and most importantly, new off-street parking, both for the lodge and for the library. And to date, the bottom floor is way more finished than it was. We've cut out the beams and supported the ceiling and all kinds of stuff, but it has not been built out yet. And every lodge meeting we talk about it, and we're getting closer. I can feel it. We're getting closer. It's coming. On September 19th, 2015, Independence Lodge number 10 celebrated its 200th anniversary. The community celebration was held at the lodge building in our new parking lot. The event featured a full barbecue lunch with all the fixins, a lodge history presentation, a live band, lodge tours, face painting by the Rainbow Girls, balloon animals and games by the Cairo Shriner Clowns, free beverages handed out by the Cub Scouts and the Boy Scouts, and several displays and presentations. Vermont legislators Sarah Buxton and Allison Eastman presented Independence Lodge with a proclamation recognizing our 200-year history. And more than 18 Master Masons from Independence Lodge were honored for having more than 50 years of membership in the lodge. The height of the celebration, however, was the laying of the cornerstone plaque by Brother Dick Buxton, 62 years a Mason, and his grandson, Andy Buxton, 3 years a Mason, and the dedication of our lodge building by the Grand Lodge officers using an ancient Masonic ceremony. And another highlight was we had 3 generations of Masons there. Brother Doug Atwood, his dad was there, Alden Atwood, and his son was there. Your son's first name? What's that? Nicholas. Nick Atwood was there. So we had 3 generations of Masons that attended our ceremony. It was pretty cool. Membership for Independence Lodge has remained fairly constant during most of its 209-year history. Just prior to the anti-Masonic period, it was around 95 members. After the period was over in 1847, the lodge still maintained a fairly robust membership of around 65 members. Over the years, the lodge's membership has always hovered around 85 to 100. Its highest membership, however, occurred just after the end of the Vietnam War, when its membership soared to 150 in 1971 and 147 in 1973. Today, sadly, our membership is the lowest it's been since the initial chartering of our lodge in 1815. We have just a membership of just over 50 members. And that is something that is indicative across the country. The lodge membership is dwindling very quickly. And it's just something that's indicative with Masons, with American Legion, with the Elks Club, the Moose Lodge. Everybody is experiencing it. Independence Lodge has been an important part of the Orwell community for 209 years. It has hosted many fundraising events, including golf tournaments, cribbage tournaments, an annual bow shoot, serving community breakfast, and having all types of snack bars and fried dough at many different events and parades. It has also been very generous over the years, donating thousands of dollars to the Orwell Village School, local community groups, town churches, youth organizations, Cub Scouts and Boy Scouts, and youth sports group, just to name a few. It has sponsored many young men and women to attend the Vermont Conservation Camp, as well as sponsoring other students to attend various school programs, field trips, and camps. The Lodge has helped purchase American flags and Christmas wreaths for display in town. Most importantly, and this is the final line of my presentation, it has always been there to assist with money, materials, or labor when a community member, Mason or not, was in need. Thank you. Questions? That was that good. There's no questions. Joe?
I have a question. I was really interested to hear about the renumbering of the lodges
Yep.
after the anti-Masonic period. And it occurred to me that I feel like a lot of the low number ones are in our area. Was there anything particularly about Addison County that was...
So two of the very first 5 lodges were Middlebury and Virgins. And they kept their charters. So Virgins wound up with number 1. And Union Lodge out of Middlebury wound up with number 2. Morning Sun out of Bridport, which is now number 5. Help me, Jim. What were they originally? Do you know?
No, I don't remember.
Somewhere like in the low 20s.
I know Brandon was 25, but
Yeah, but that was after the Masonic period.
well,
Yeah.
that was the old number before.
Yeah.
That was 25.
Yeah.
What?
So it's just because of the area. The other 3 lodges were all south, and 2 of those went extinct. And there's one left down there, and I can't remember which one it is. But the lodges over the years the renumbering system is very strict. I mean, you know, when you merge the lodge, you have to get permission from the Grand Lodge which number you're going to use. The old lodge, the new lodge, you know, you can't use both. You can't be an slash. So the numbering system is very, very strict. But naming lodges, you know, you can change the name of your lodge anytime you want, but you always keep the same number.
The Vermont Lodge, which was the original first lodge, didn't come back, but when they did reestablish, they did not get the...
They didn't get their original number.
They were
Yeah,
18 under the
Yep.
new.
yeah. And they're since extinct now too. They're not around anymore.
How many lodges are in Vermont?
So when I was district deputy, I think there were 72. I think now we're down mid-60s maybe, low 60s. Every year, every Grand Lodge, there's always some lodges that merge with other lodges. Once in a great while, you'll see a lodge just go extinct, that just disappear. It doesn't happen very often. They usually try to merge them with somebody else. The Grand Lodge does.
How many U.S. presidents were Masons, and then how many really distinctive generals were Masons?
13 U.S. presidents were Masons, the last of which was Gerald Ford. There's a rumor that Ronald Reagan took the first degree of Masonry and never completed it. I have not been able to find proof of that. The generals, I can't tell you right off the top of my head how many generals were. I haven't really paid a lot of attention to the generals. But some other famous Masons that may surprise you was J.C. Penney, John Cash Penney, Colonel Sanders, Harlan, that was Harlan, I remember his name now. He was, Colonel Sanders was quite a character. He didn't become famous for kicking until he was in his 60s. And before that, he did everything from pumping gas. He was a midwife in the Kentucky Haulers for a while. He killed a guy in a fight one time. Yeah, it was an interesting matter. I've wrote extensively about Paul Revere as well. He was very famous.
Red Skelton was one.
Red Skelton was a Mason. Yep, he was. John Wayne was a Mason. The closest famous Mason to date is the country singer Brad Paisley, thank you. Brad Paisley. Brad Paisley's a very active Mason in the Masonic Order. Yep.
What's the significance of the visuals of the apron?
Oh, okay, so,
Now yours is nothing.
yeah, so this is a purple apron. So all Grand Lodge officers, of which there's like 5 in the room here, this is what you wear as a Grand Lodge officer. There's no insignia on it unless you were one of the top 5 officers, I think, and then there's an insignia on it. But as Grand Marshal, Grand Senior Deacon, and now Grand Pursuivant, it's just a plain. Once you have become a Grand Lodge officer, you can wear a purple apron for life, whether you still hold that position or not. You have earned that right to wear a purple apron the rest of your life. This is the jewel of the Grand Pursuivant. It has absolutely nothing to do with aprons or jewels, so I have no idea why there's a sword and a baton on here, but that's what it is. All the jewels, except for the district deputies, are all different for all the Grand Lodge officers. Louis.
Why did some of the lodges elect to turn their charters in and others kept them?
You know, I've read quite a bit about that, and you know, we talked today about how the internet and how social media is ruining, you know, our country. And when the anti-Masonic period hit in 1826 and 1827, it was just like social media. It just spread through like wildfire. And people believed all of these wild accusations and wild rumors, you know, of, I don't want to gross anybody out, but of killing goats and blood rituals and honor, you know, praising the devil and all of this stuff. It just went crazy. And so a lot of these lodges, their members said, I want nothing to do with this anymore. You know, people are beating me up. I got kicked out of my church. I can't hold office. So the brothers would vote, and they say, no, we're getting rid of it, you know, because they all assumed it would never come back. And so they just got rid of their charters and left Masonry altogether. And when it finally did come back in 1847, it started slow, but unlike how everything we do now is saved on the internet for life, that finally died down and it went away. And Masonry, and the Masons were very smart. They reinvented themselves. They were not going to be a social club anymore. We're going to raise money and donate it to schools, and we're going to build hospitals, and we're going to build orphanages and build old folks' homes. And that's what they devoted their life to for years and years and years. And now, Freemasonry is the largest philanthropical organization in the world, worldwide, and the oldest.
They also, during the wars, the servicemen, because even the servicemen themselves had lodge meetings or stuff around.
Oh, yeah.
Work. But the Masonic Service Association lodges a lot of money aiding the families and the servicemen and veterans when they came back.
Yep, and they still do that today for relief for hurricane victims and earthquake victims and stuff. There's all kinds of books out there, and one of them is on the end here that talks about the lodges that were held in the military. And they would get together at a base somewhere, and we're talking from the Civil War all the way up through, or the Revolutionary War all the way up through the current war. They would get together on a base, and they would find a master mason and make him the master, and he'd raise everybody to be masons, and they would open a lodge in the base. And they would meet for as long as they were there, and then they would get dispersed somewhere else, and when they came home, they would affiliate with their local lodge at home. There's a famous story that I have read, and I have seen the documentation for it, where during the Revolutionary War, a gentleman was taken captive, and he displayed the Masonic sign of a Mason, indicating that he was a Mason, and his captors were Masons, and they let him go. And President William McKinley was very famous. He decided to become a Mason after visiting a field hospital and seeing how even the soldiers from the South were treated, who were Masons. They were treated much better by the Union doctors because they were Masons. And it so moved him that when he got out of the service, he became a Mason and was a very famous Mason.
How did you decide on the name Independence?
Well, there's no documentation that I can find anywhere. But Mount Independence being part of our area here, and that I think that they chose that for that reason. That would be my guess. Any other questions?
What is the difference between a Mason and a Shriner? Do you have to be a Mason first?
Absolutely.
Okay.
So in Masonry, there's the Blue Lodge, which is what that lodge building is behind there. And you can't do anything in Masonry until you become a Mason in a Blue Lodge. And there's like a half a dozen appendant bodies. There's Scottish Rite, York Rite, Eastern Star, Shriners, some other kind of less known organizations. But every person in every one of those organizations started out getting their 3 degrees in a Blue Lodge, and then went on to join other organizations.
Which was the oldest Grand Lodge in the world? Was it the Grand Lodge of England or Scotland?
Scotland. Grand Lodge of Scotland is recognized as the oldest Grand Lodge in the world. England's not far behind it.
So I'd assume the first lodge was somewhere in Scotland, right?
Yeah, they say that when the Scottish king joined the Masons Guild, they started allowing nobles and other important people to join in, all of his buddies basically, and they formed a lodge, and that's what is considered. There's a building there that's got a name, and it escapes me, but that's where they were meeting, and that's considered the oldest lodge in the.
Active?
No, it's a tourist attraction at this point. There are some lodges in England that are probably 500 or 600 years old that are still active. Yeah.
In
Jim?
England, the Grand Masters, most of them have been of the royal family.
Yes. Yeah, the Grand Master of England has to be a member of the royal family per their charter. Yeah.
And the significance of Cairo?
So every shrine has a name. There's 2 in the state of Vermont, Cairo Shrine and Mount Sinai Shrine. Cairo's in the southern part of the state, Cairo Shrine's in the northern part of the state. And so almost all of them have an Arabic name. So it's just something that when they formed the Shriners, it had a very deep meaning with the Arabic countries and stuff like that. So most of your shrines have Arabic names, but it's just the name of our organization up here in the northern part of the state, or the southern part of the state, sorry.
Isn't Cairo or Mount Sinai one of them the 3rd shrine in the nation?
Mount Sinai is number 3.
Number 3. Yeah.
Mount Sinai's number 3?
Cairo is like 90,
Okay.
91.
Yeah, I don't have a lot of research on the shrine, but I knew that Mount Sinai's been around for a while. Yeah, and it's odd that the Shrine and Eastern Star, the 2 biggest appendant bodies and the York Rite and the Scottish Rite, all have national leaders. National, they all have somebody that's in charge of that group for the entire country. Masonry does not. George Washington tried at some point to become the grand leader of all Masons of the whole country, and the Masons said, yeah, no, we don't want that. We want every state to be autonomous. So even though all of our appendant bodies all have national leaders, Blue Lodge Masonry, your Grand Master for your state is the highest you can go for your state. There's no position above that.
He declared because he did not serve as a Grand Master.
Yeah.
And because to be the world head, you would
Yep.
have to be going up the staircase like a local officer, master. To be a Grand Master, you have to serve as a master,
Yep.
and same thing in the other bodies. You go up the staircase.
So 2 of our presidents were Grand Masters. Truman served as Grand Master of Missouri, and Jackson served as Grand Master of Tennessee, which is quite an accomplishment. And Truman attended lodge meetings while he was president. He's the only president that we know of, save for the ones in the very early years. But the modern era presidents that were Masons, Truman is the only one that went to lodge meetings while president of the United States.
That's a good example of being on the level, because the master of the lodge that Truman attended in D.C. was a gardener at the White House.
Yep. Yep, I remember that, yeah. Any other questions? I can stand up here and talk about this all night long.
Actually, Middlebury's Lodge is the large brick, multi-story building, correct?
Was,
Was the lodge.
yes.
So Was it a matter of what the lodge could afford as far as what they built?
Well, Middlebury suffered a couple of fires for starters.
I could
And then,
speak to that building. It was built in 18, as a Masonic in partner with three others, built it in 1823.
but they,
It had, they were in and out, they took, reaped possession of it in, 1903, meant an annex, and then we sold it because all our commercial tenants moved out.
yeah,
Stayed in the building.
a lot of the lodges around the state,
1998.
a lot of the lodges around the state that own their own buildings are finding it more and more difficult to stay in those buildings. Insurance, the buildings are getting old, taxes and stuff like that. So sometimes these Masons will buy buildings and they'll rent the bottom floor out to tenants and then meet in the top floors. And that works great as long as you got tenants in the bottom floor. And what happened with Middlebury was they lost all their tenants and they had a very low membership. So they ended up selling their building and they moved to Salisbury for many years, and then now they're meeting in Brandon.
I'm secretary of the union in Brandon now.
Yep. All right, well, thank you very much.
Well, in keeping with what John said about the benevolence of the of Masons, Orwell's right up there with it, because we do several things to raise money, and we give our money away to different organizations. And so tonight, I would like to call Katie Hunter up here. See, now you laugh. Come on, Red.
Right in between you.
Okay. So, on behalf of the members of Independence Lodge Number 10, and this is money we have raised from our breakfast. I'd like to present this check to Katie, to the library.
Thank you.
It was an amount of $705.
Yeah, that is small.
And that was
You do one more picture?
Yeah.
support of our community. People coming to our breakfast, so,
Thank you.
come and support our breakfast and we can give way back to you.
So, thank you, Tom. Yes, very indicative of what Masons have become since the anti-Masonic period ended. And we're very happy to donate to all of the organizations in town. We hope to, over the next couple of years, make sure that all of the organizations are benefactors of our breakfast. I want to thank you very much for your time, for being here tonight. I love talking about Freemasonry, as you can tell, and I'd be happy to answer any questions. And please take a look at the materials that we have before you go. Thank you.
Very much.
Thank you.